Hey guys, tonight we're slipping into the hazy, golden dawn along the Nile. You're a baker in ancient Egypt, no grand priest, no pharaoh, just you, your tired arms, and the smell of rising bread that clings to everything you own. The cool sand sticks to your feet as you stumble toward your little mud brick bakery, trying to beat the sun before it beats you. The air is still, except for the huff of donkeys and the splash of river water being hauled in jars. You're already sweating before you even see the oven. You probably won't survive this lifestyle, no offense. Most folks today wouldn't last one sunrise. It's not a 9 to 5, it's an until you drop. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You shuffle through the courtyard while the horizon's barely begun to bleed orange. Everything's silent except for distant temple drums calling priests to wake and pray. You're not praying, you're checking your ovens. Each is a rounded clay structure patched and repatched over the years, glowing faintly from embers you banked the night before. You run your palm near a vent hole, still warm. Good. You won't have to start completely from scratch. But you can't trust the night watch boy to have kept the coals right. You curse under your breath, mildly, it's too early for creative insults, as you scrape aside ashes and start blowing on embers. Your cheeks puff and deflate like a dying frog. Sparks spit back. You get a face full of warm grit. Your back is already sore, and you haven't even lifted the flour. Beyond the ovens, the Nile fog curls around everything like wet linen. Soon, delivery boys will arrive from the granaries upriver. Their reed boats are loaded with sacks of emmer grain, the coarse, husky stuff that jams up your grindstones if you're not careful. You nod to one of them with bleary acknowledgement. No one's chatty yet. You begin the real work, hauling in baskets, sweeping last night's spilled flour that's now crusted with Nile mud. A stray temple cat eyes you, tail twitching, probably debating whether you're worth biting. You give it a nod too. This is your kingdom, after all, such as it is. There's a mainstream historical fact you're living right now: ancient Egyptian bakeries often operated beside breweries. Yeast was a precious, living thing. Sometimes you share your yeast starters with the beer guys, sometimes you steal theirs if your own batch goes foul. Historians still argue whether you traded yeast freely or guarded it like treasure. You're in the guard it with a stick school. So you check the covered pot of fermenting dough starter you set aside last night. Still alive, bubbling gently. Smells sour-sweet, like it should. You grin sleepily. A delivery boy kicks at your door, announces a new load. You sign off on the basket with a dab of ink on scrap papyrus, barely legible. You're not a priestly scribe, but you can scrawl your name. You shoulder open the storeroom door, watching the dust mote swirl. Your arms already itch with the promise of flour. You cough when you set the basket down too hard, white powder explodes into your face like a slap. You swear again, softly. At this point, the oven's warmer but still not ready. So you fetch dry reeds, set them alight in a small side hearth, and gently feed the flames through the oven side vents. Smoke curls out the top. Your eyes water. You blink back tears and think about quitting, but no one's hiring for anything better. Remember that cat? It's sneaking behind you now, pawing at fallen grain. You let it. Mice are worse. You hum tunelessly, your voice scraping like the quern stones you'll soon use. A temple scribe walks by outside, nose high in the air, pretending not to see you. That's fine. You'll see him later when he buys your best bread for a festival offering. Everyone needs you eventually. You take a moment to stretch your back. The city is waking up. You hear donkeys braying, a potter shouting for apprentices, distant laughter. You're not part of that yet. First, you must get the ovens to roaring heat. You feed another bundle of reeds. Sparks swirl. You mutter the day's plan to yourself, counting on your fingers, grind grain, mix dough, shape loaves, keep the starter alive, please the priests, ration the workers, and try not to die in the heat. You wonder if it'll be one of those days the river smells too strong, or the air bakes so hot the dough rises before you even finish kneading. That happened last flood season. Disaster. Your first apprentice arrives, yawning so wide you see all his missing teeth. He mutters a mastiff like it's a curse. You chuckle, toss him a broom, and tell him to sweep. He swears he's not hungover. Sure. You take another moment to stare at the embers. You've almost got them right. The oven's breathing. Outside, you hear sandals slapping in the dust as more workers arrive. Your little bakery is about to go from silence to chaos. One last breath. You think about your family, sleeping, hopefully. You think about the temple orders you have to fulfill. The priest will complain if the offering bread is lopsided. You rub your eyes. The sun crests the horizon, casting everything in that unreal, pinkish glow. You sigh. Time to work. You trudge over to the heavy quernstones with a resigned grunt, waving your apprentice forward with the air of a half-awake pharaoh commanding an empire of precisely 2 half-competent minions. He's already complaining that his arms hurt. You roll your eyes so hard it's a miracle they don't fall out of your head. The quernstones sit like sleeping hippos in the corner, crusted with flour dust from yesterday. You slap them lightly, sending up a white puff. It's going to be a long morning. You set the basket of emmer grain nearby, watching the rough husks catch the early light. Each kernel is tough, stubborn, designed by nature to survive droughts and abuse, sort of like you. You squat down, planting your feet in the sand-dusted floor, and start turning the upper stone in slow, rhythmic circles. The scraping noise is oddly soothing. A grind, a scrape, a little shower of flour sifts out the side. Your apprentice joins in half-heartedly, and you immediately scold him for going too fast. You want it coarse enough to break teeth, you grumble. Ancient bakeries relied on manpower for grinding, no fancy mills here. It's all sweat and calluses. Historians still argue whether the grinding work was mainly done by household slaves or paid laborers. In your bakery, it's whoever you can convince to show up sober. The grindstone sticks for a moment. You grunt, shifting your weight to push it free. Flour dust coats your fingers, clings to your sweaty neck. You scratch absent-mindedly, leaving streaks like primitive war paint. Nearby, the temple cat watches you with mocking disinterest. You tell it you'll bake it in a loaf if it doesn't stop judging you. It flicks its tail and closes its eyes, supremely unbothered. Your apprentice sneezes. The flour fog is real, thick enough to choke an ox. You laugh, but then immediately cough. You both sit there hacking like old men. Finally, you get a rhythm. The quernstone sighs with every turn. Grain crunches, releases its dusty treasure. The smell is earthy, warm. It's work you can do in your sleep, and sometimes you practically do. You run your fingers through the fresh flour. It's coarse by modern standards, with bits of bran and grit you can't quite get out. You think about how everyone in town probably has worn down molars from chewing this stuff all their lives. You make a mental note to pick up new sandstone discs at the market next month. These are worn, and the grooves barely bite anymore. Your apprentice stops. Claims his arms are dead. You tell him he'll live, and if not, you'll use him for oven fuel. He doesn't laugh, but you do. You wipe your face, leaving streaks of white. You taste grain dust on your tongue. It's not terrible, honestly. Nutty. You pick out a tiny pebble. That's the problem with bulk grain deliveries, the farmers don't care if there's a bit of the Nile shoreline in there. You fill a woven basket with the ground flour. It's heavy, but you swing it up onto your shoulder anyway, grunting theatrically. Your apprentice mimics you, badly, and you both shuffle over to the prep table. One of the delivery boys peeks in the doorway. More grain coming, he says, trying to sound important. You tell him to drop it by the door and not let the cats at it. He scowls, but obeys. You hear the thud of the basket hitting the ground outside. You sigh. More grinding later. Always more. You glance at the embers in the oven. Still alive, still glowing. Good. You'll need that heat soon enough. There's a surprising fact that crosses your mind. In ancient Egyptian tomb paintings, bakers are shown working in teams, often in this exact grinding posture. Immortalized in art, for all eternity, bent over, sweating, grinding flour while a scribe watches, writing down exactly how many sacks you finish. You snort. Lucky them. Your apprentice asks if you think you'll be painted on a tomb wall someday. You laugh so hard you nearly drop the basket. Sure, you say, but only to show how not to do it. You shift your weight, adjusting the basket on your shoulder. The sun's well over the horizon now. Heat seeps in through the reed roof, starting its daily assault on your sanity. You feel the ache in your arm settle deep, that bone-level fatigue that never quite goes away. You tell yourself it's honest work. You tell yourself that because no one else is going to. You set the basket down on the prep table with a satisfying thunk. Flour puffs up again. The apprentice sneezes twice. You clap him on the shoulder, leaving a white handprint. You step back and survey the grindstones. Still serviceable, though you see tiny chips forming on the edges. You make another mental note, get them regrooved before flood season. Otherwise you'll be serving crunchy bread to the entire town. You wipe your brow. The flour sticks like a second skin. You lean against the table for a second, feeling the cool clay under your palms. Outside, the town is properly awake now. Shouts, donkey brays, river traffic. Life in the ancient world is loud, messy, and wonderfully predictable. You straighten up, rolling your shoulders. You give the apprentice a look that says, "We're only just getting started." He groans. You grin. And then you both turn back to the quern stones, because the day's flour isn't going to grind itself. You're bent over the mixing table now, your arms dusted like a ghost, staring at the wide clay bowl that will soon hold enough dough to feed a small army. The table is pitted and scarred from years of abuse, but it's yours, sturdy enough to survive another flood, probably. Your apprentice lugs the flour basket over, drops it with all the grace of a falling obelisk. A cloud of flour billows up. You both hack like desert camels in a sandstorm. Careful, you wheeze, waving the dust away. You trying to kill us before the heat does. He grumbles something about old man, but you ignore it. You're focused on the dough starter, cradling the pot like a sacred relic. It's your pride and joy, alive, bubbling, sour with that pungent perfume of yeast and bacteria doing their eternal dance. You tip a scoop of the starter into the bowl, watching the glistening bubbles pop. You sniff it. Perfect. Not dead. Not too acidic. You've killed enough batches in your time to know the difference. Here's the mainstream fact you're living. Egyptian bread making relied on these living starters passed down through generations, the original sourdough before hipsters ruined it. Historians still argue whether these starters were shared communally or jealously guarded. You'd stab someone with a baking peel before giving them your recipe. You pour in water, fetched from the Nile by the delivery boys at dawn. It's not exactly Evian. There's a suspicious leaf floating in the jug. You fish it out and flick it at the apprentice, who squeaks in protest. Now comes the part that ruins your back, stirring. No fancy mixers, no metal bowls, just your hands and a big stick you carved years ago. You start slow, folding the flour into the bubbling starter, the water seeping in, transforming everything into sticky, promising chaos. Your apprentice looks disgusted. It's alive. You nod solemnly. If it doesn't crawl off the table, you're not feeding it enough. He shudders. You smirk. You both plunge in, kneading by hand. The clay bowl creaks as you work the dough. Your palms squeak wetly against the mass, folding it over and over until it resists like a living thing. You're sweating buckets. Flour paste turns to mud on your arms. It's hypnotic, though. The steady push-pull of the dough, the earthy smell filling the air. You slip into a slow rhythm. You mutter encouragement to the dough, half joking, half serious. Rise, you stubborn thing. Your apprentice looks at you like you've lost it. You explain that bread listens. He doesn't buy it. Nearby, the cat saunters closer. Its nose twitches. It meows once, imperious. You flick a bit of flour at it. Not for you. It bats at the dough with a tentative paw. You gently shoo it away, promising yourself you'll let it lick the empty bowl later. You shift your weight, feeling every vertebra complain. You're not young, not old, just permanently tired. Your hands ache, calluses pressing into the dough. You add a pinch of salt, taken from a jar sealed with wax. Egyptian salt taxes are no joke, so you ration it carefully. The apprentice tries to sneak extra. You smack his hand with the mixing stick. He yelps. You both laugh. You call him a donkey. He calls you older than Ra himself. And the dough? It's starting to come together. Elastic, smooth, warm under your palms. It's good. You're good at this, even if no one praises you for it. There's a weird fact you remember while kneading. Some tomb scenes show people apparently singing to the dough as they work. Historians think it might have been a way to keep rhythm, or to please the gods, or maybe just to stay sane while your arms fell off. You decide to test it. You belt out a tuneless chant about bread rising, improvising lyrics that insult your apprentice's mother. He actually snorts, laughing. You grin. See? It works. He rolls his eyes but joins in, mumbling a verse about you being too old to lift a sack of grain. The dough gets a final turn. You run your fingers over it, feeling its smooth tension. Satisfied, you plop it back in the bowl and cover it with a reed mat to let it rest. You finally straighten up fully, spine popping like a dying fire. You hiss through your teeth. Outside, the sun is crawling higher. The bakery is turning into a clay oven itself. Heat presses in on you from all sides. Sweat beads on your upper lip. You drag a sleeve over your forehead and lean on the table. Your apprentice flops onto the ground dramatically. You poke him with your foot. We're not done. He groans. You walk over to the ovens, checking the embers. They're ready to be stoked into a proper blaze soon. You'll need them roaring to bake the day's orders. You glance at the doorway. A temple runner will probably arrive soon with another order for festival bread, special loaves shaped like animals, with fancy patterns pressed in. You grimace. Those are always a pain. You look at the waiting dough, gently rising under the mat. For a second, you feel something like pride. It's alive. You made it live. You tell your apprentice this is the easy part. He looks horrified. You grin wickedly. Just wait till we start shaping. You flick the reed mat off the dough with a flourish worthy of a temple priest unveiling a god. The dough sighs and slumps a little, as if embarrassed by the attention. You prod it gently with a floury finger. Soft, elastic, puffy, just right. Your apprentice peers over your shoulder, skeptical. Looks the same as before. You level a glare at him. It's risen. It's alive. Show some respect. He squints. It's a blob. You cluck your tongue. A delicious blob. Now get the shaping board. He drags over a battered plank that's seen more loaves than most people have seen years. It's scored with cut marks and faint images of loaves pressed in over time, a baker's fossil record. You dust it off with your hand, sending a flurry of flour into his face. He sputters. You don't apologize. You dump the dough onto the board with a satisfying thwump. It jiggles. You grin at it like it's an old friend. Shaping is where the magic happens, where you turn a formless lump into something people recognize as bread. You slice the dough with a bronze knife, dull from years of abuse but still better than any reed blade. Your apprentice tries to copy you, but his cuts are jagged, the dough sticking. He curses under his breath. Careful, you chide. You're not gutting a Nile perch. He grimaces, adjusts his grip, and tries again. Better. Not great. But better. You talk him through shaping the rolls, pull, fold, tuck the edges underneath to keep the tension on top. Like wrapping a sleeping baby. He gives you a look. You don't have kids. You shrug. I have bread. Mainstream fact here, Egyptian loaves came in all shapes, cones, discs, even animal forms for temple offerings. You demonstrate a simple fish shape with casual skill. He stares. That's actually good. You beam. High praise from the scribe's disappointment. He calls you a donkey again. You both laugh. You work through the dough steadily, rolling, folding, shaping. It's methodical, meditative. The cat sits on the edge of the board, tail flicking, eyes tracking every movement. You toss it a lump of scrap dough. It sniffs it disdainfully. Cats, honestly. You show your apprentice how to score the tops with a bronze blade, making the loaves prettier and helping them bake evenly. He immediately goes overboard, carving his name in one. You smack the back of his head gently. No one wants your autograph in their bread. He rubs his head, sulking. You both pause when you hear a shout outside. A temple runner bursts in, breathless. Festival loaves. 20. Animal shapes. For tomorrow's rites. You groan so theatrically it echoes. The runner ignores you and drops a basket of extra grain payment, already half spilled. Thanks, you mutter. You look at the apprentice. He's grinning. I get to do the animals. Not get to. Have to. He doesn't care. He's already grabbing dough. You show him a simple crocodile shape. Pinch for the snout, score for the scales. He laughs. You feel a grudging bit of pride. He's not half bad. Quirky tidbit, some animal-shaped loaves were so realistic that people wondered if they were meant to scare off pests or amuse the gods. You mention this while rolling out a hippo shape, its big mouth scored to look like it's yelling. Historians still argue, you add, whether these shapes were religious offerings or just bakers' ego trips. Your apprentice says it's probably both. You can't argue. You both settle into a rhythm, shaping animals, scoring lines. The clay table gets crusted with bits of dough. You scrape it off with the knife. It's hot as Sekhmet's breath in here now. Sweat drips off your nose, splashing onto the dough. You hope the gods appreciate the added seasoning. You pause to sip warm, slightly muddy water from a jar. Your apprentice drinks like he's been lost in the desert for days. You wipe your mouth with the back of your hand. Don't drown. He belches loudly. You smack him again. Outside, voices call. Market's waking up. Boats creaking on the Nile. A woman is yelling at a donkey that's apparently refusing to move. You listen with half an ear while shaping another batch. The temple runner is still loitering in the doorway, watching your work. You glare at him. If you're not paying extra, move along. He jumps and leaves. You and your apprentice keep going. Fish. Birds. Crocodiles. Even a weird little baboon that you're pretty sure is unrecognizable. You call him over. Look at this disaster. He squints. Is it a dog? You sigh. Sure. Tell them it's Anubis. He cackles. You roll your eyes but can't help smiling. Finally, you finish the last loaf, setting it carefully on a waiting reed tray. You both lean back, surveying the day's work. It's messy, uneven, but unmistakably bread. You give him a small nod. Not bad. Don't get used to praise. He shrugs, smirking. You both stand there in the baking heat, sticky with sweat and flour, but there's something about it, this moment, this quiet. You made food. You made life. And the ovens are waiting. You squint at the ovens, those gaping maws of fired clay lining the far wall. Heat ripples off them in visible waves, and for a second you wonder if you can actually see sound. The crackle of embers seems to shimmer in the air. Your apprentice groans. It's too hot already. You wipe your brow with a grit-smeared sleeve. Then get used to it. This is the easy part. He glares at you with the sulky indignation of a teenager conscripted into temple service. You ignore him and shuffle toward the fire pit. Egyptian bread ovens are simple genius, big, beehive-shaped clay structures open at the bottom to feed wood and straw, with a narrow opening at the top to jam in loaves. You bend to check the coals. They glow like molten rubies. You rake the embers with an iron hook. Sparks fly, settling onto your arms like tiny burns. You brush them off lazily. You've been branded worse by your own ovens over the years. Your apprentice fetches a basket of dried reeds, the fuel of choice for people who can't afford acacia or palm logs. He tosses them in, and flames leap up, licking the dome. Mainstream fact: Egyptian bakers often fired their ovens twice daily, once to heat them to the right temperature, then to bake in the retained heat. It's an art form knowing when they're just right. You tell your apprentice as much. He squints at the fire. How do you know? You sniff, point to the color of the dome's inner walls. Pale cream. Not black. Black is too cold. White? You've ruined the bread. He nods, impressed despite himself. You let him try. He shoves in too many reeds, and the dome flashes white-hot. You cross your arms. Well done. You've invented cremation. He curses under his breath while you dampen it down, controlling the fire with patient nudges and a steady stream of insults. It's hypnotic work. Flames roar. Heat washes over you in pulsing waves. Your clothes cling to your back, soaked. You don't even want to think about what you smell like right now. You grab a flat peel, a paddle worn smooth by years of scraping charred loaves from the oven's maw. The handle is wrapped with strips of old linen so you don't blister your hands even more. Your apprentice eyes it warily. I'm not sticking my arm in there. You snort. You will. Or you'll starve. He goes pale. The cat prowls closer, sensing prey in the form of fallen crumbs. You nudge it with your foot before it catches fire on stray sparks. You load the first tray of shaped loaves onto the peel. Fish shapes. Crocodiles. Cones. Even your sad little baboon loaf. Show time, you whisper. With careful timing, you slide them into the opening one by one, feeling the blast of heat on your face. Your eyes sting. You blink through it. Your apprentice is sweating buckets, fanning himself with a reed basket like an overstressed noble. You done, you ask. He scowls but steps up. You hand him the peel. He handles it like a venomous snake. Don't drop them, you instruct. He does, immediately, scattering 2 loaves into the coals. You both watch them ignite. Offerings for Ra, you mutter solemnly. He's too horrified to laugh at first, then starts giggling despite himself. You whack him lightly with the empty peel. Quirky tidbit: some wealthier Egyptians had separate ovens for different breads, one for coarse barley loaves, one for fancy emmer wheat ones. You point out that this is a one-oven town, so everyone gets the same heat, like it or not. He rolls his eyes. So egalitarian. Shut up and load the next tray. Together you get into a rhythm, shaping, scoring, loading, rotating. It's a sweaty ballet of heat and smoke. You rap on the dome occasionally to test for that hollow sound that tells you it's too cool and needs more fuel. Your apprentice thinks you're a wizard. You don't correct him. Outside, the street noise grows. You hear people arguing prices over dates, a vendor yelling about fish, the thunk of pottery being stacked. You tune it all out, focusing on the bread. Historians still argue whether these ovens were communal or privately owned. You mutter as much to your apprentice. He says he wouldn't share with your smelly self. You throw a ball of dough at his head. It sticks for a second before falling. He squawks. The cat sniffs it, decides it's not worth the effort. You open the oven door a crack, feeling the radiant heat on your face. The loaves inside are puffing beautifully, turning that warm, golden brown that makes your stomach growl. You breathe deep. Smells like survival. Your apprentice peers in. Looks done. Not yet. You want raw dough. He hesitates. I like raw dough. You stare at him like he's cursed. Get out. He cackles and dances away, narrowly avoiding your peel. Finally, you deem the batch ready. You slide them out one by one, setting them on reed trays to cool. The smell is rich, nutty, earthy. You both stand over them for a moment, breathing it in. He leans over to steal one. You smack his fingers. Let it cool, you order. He groans. You lean against the oven, exhausted. It's barely mid-morning. You both have hours of this left. But for now, you admire the bread. Your bread. Your living. Your art. The loaves rest on reed trays, steaming slightly in the sticky Nile heat. You wipe sweat from your face with a scrap of linen so filthy it's probably baking its own yeast cultures by now. Your apprentice eyes the bread like a starving dog. You narrow your eyes. Not yet. He groans. How long? You lean in conspiratorially. Until the gods say so. He glares. You're insufferable. You grin, smacking the tray's edge. A few crumbs skitter off and the cat pounces on them, chewing them like they're prime goose liver. You wave your hand over the loaves with all the pomp of a temple priest. Observe. Cooling is critical. Rush it, and the crust goes soggy. He rolls his eyes. So what? Soggy bread still fills your gut. You give him a look so withering it could parch the Nile. You pick up a loaf, hot but firm. The scored fish shape held. Scales crisp, fins defined. Not bad for temple offerings. Mainstream fact, offerings to the gods had to look perfect, priest inspectors would reject ugly loaves without a second thought. You tell your apprentice, who mutters that the priests are just picky eaters. You select the best of the batch for the temple runner, stacking them carefully. He eventually reappears, still sweaty from his errand running. He pokes one loaf, frowns. You slap his hand away. Pay first. He drops a sack of barley at your feet. You test its weight, give it a grudging nod, and hand over the offerings. He leaves, mumbling about rude bakers. Your apprentice sighs with relief. That's done. You snort. Ha! We're only halfway. He whines. You slap his shoulder. Come on. Next batch. Quirky tidbit, Egyptians sometimes use date syrup or honey to glaze bread for special occasions. You show your apprentice a small pot of syrup you keep hidden, just enough for rich customers who want fancy loaves. He dips a finger in and tastes it, eyes going wide. You've been holding out on me. Pay me, you deadpan. He scoffs and starts prepping dough for the next round. Historians still argue whether these syrups were everyday ingredients or strictly festival luxuries. You muse on it aloud, to annoy him. Seems like a waste for commoners, he says. You shrug. Everyone wants to feel like a pharaoh sometimes. He tries to shape a loaf into a lotus. It looks like a squashed frog. You cackle. Sure, the gods will love that. He throws flour at you. You launch a counterattack with dough scraps. The cat, insulted by the chaos, retreats under a table and glares. You settle back into work. Kneading, shaping, scoring, arranging. The second batch takes shape. Outside the door, voices drift in, someone hawking fish, another yelling about lentils, the rhythmic creak of a potter's wheel. Life going on. Your apprentice leans against the wall, sweat dripping from his nose. How do you do this every day? You squint at him. One loaf at a time. He rolls his eyes. That's deep. You grin. Shut up and get the peel. You test the oven's heat again with the back of your hand. Just right. You nod approvingly. Go on, you tell him. Your turn. He approaches like he's about to poke an angry crocodile. Carefully, he loads the loaves onto the peel. You offer unhelpful advice the whole time. Don't drop them. Don't smush them. Don't burn your face off. Helpful, he mutters. You watch as he slides them in, one by one. You offer a begrudging, not terrible. He brightens like Ra himself smiled at him. You sit on an overturned basket, flexing your aching hands. Your fingers are stiff, joints swollen from years of kneading. He notices. You're old. You snort. Bread doesn't care. The fire pops. The cat purrs. You lean back, closing your eyes for a moment despite the noise outside. The apprentice sits next to you. Quiet for once. You crack one eye open. Don't get used to breaks. He snickers. You both sit there a bit longer, watching the bread bake. The heat is oppressive, but it's the kind of heat you know. The kind you can work with. You start planning the next batch in your head, how to ration the flour, what shapes will sell best today, what the temple will inevitably complain about. Bread waits for no one. And neither does this bakery. You groan, push yourself up, and slap his shoulder. Enough. Let's work. He sighs dramatically but gets up. You both move to the oven, the peel ready. It's time to feed the city. You stand over the reed mats littered with flour dust, rolling out fresh dough. Your palms are sore, your back is screaming, and you're certain you've developed a permanent flour tan. Your apprentice is barely functioning, leaning against the wall with his eyes half closed. Wake up. He jerks. I'm awake. You snort. Prove it. Knead. He groans but drags himself to the table. His dough is a disgrace, lumpy, dry in patches, wet in others. You prod it with theatrical disgust. It's not a brick for a pyramid. Fix it. He mutters curses under his breath that would make a donkey blush. You fight a smile. Mainstream fact, ancient Egyptian bakers use saddle querns to grind their own flour. You gesture to the big grindstone in the corner. The apprentice sighs as he turns it, grumbling about how his arms will fall off. You remind him it's better than biting into gravel. After all, poorly ground flour often contains sand that wore down teeth over the years. He groans even louder. I'm gonna die toothless. You shrug. Who isn't? The cat, perhaps sensing his despair, rubs against his legs. He mutters something about giving up and becoming a potter instead. You shake your head. Those guys smell worse than us. Quirky tidbit, some bakers even added extra sand deliberately, claiming it helped the dough hold its shape. You tell him this, and he gives you a look of pure betrayal. You've been feeding people rocks. You spread your hands. Who am I to argue with tradition? He laughs despite himself, accidentally slapping dough onto the floor. The cat eyes it with interest. You pick it up and throw it back on the table. 3-second rule. Maybe 4. He makes a face but keeps kneading. The air is stifling. The sun's coming higher. You can hear vendors yelling about watermelons by the riverside. You fan yourself with a woven tray. Faster, you tell him. Slave driver, he whines. You raise an eyebrow. Technically, yes. Your temple property. He glares. Thanks for the reminder. You clap him on the back. Flour explodes in a white cloud. He sneezes, scaring the cat away. Historians still argue whether these temple bakeries operated like businesses or redistribution centers. You share this thought, which only earns you another groan. Do I look like a historian? You smirk. No. You look like a baker's disappointment. He throws a lump of dough at your head. You catch it and shape it quickly. See? Progress. He scowls but can't hide the smile tugging at his mouth. You both return to work, elbows knocking as you knead. It's a shared misery. Occasionally, you pause to flick water onto the dough to keep it pliable. You narrate every step like he's too dim to remember it. Fold. Press. Turn. Repeat. Like breathing. He mimics your tone. Fold. Press. Turn. Kill me. Good. You're getting it. You switch to shaping. Your hands move automatically. Flatten, roll, pinch the ends. Fish. Crocodile. A strange duck shape for a client who insists the gods want variety. He fumbles along, trying to make a lotus again. Better, you lie generously. He brightens. Really? No. He hurls a fistful of flour at you. The cat sneezes from under the table. Outside, you hear the murmur of the city, children shouting, water sellers chanting. Someone's playing a flute badly. You sigh. You know, you say, lowering your voice for effect, this is sacred work. He snorts. You? Sacred. You ignore him. Bread feeds the priests. Feeds the workers. Feeds the dead. He tilts his head. The dead. You nod. Offerings. Tomb supplies. If you want to live forever, you'd better bring bread. He looks skeptical. Sounds like a scam. You shrug. The gods love carbs. He snickers. You slap the shaped loaves onto trays. You both step back, surveying your work. Not bad. Even your apprentice's pitiful attempts are vaguely bread-shaped now. You give him a solemn nod. You're almost tolerable. He salutes mockingly. High praise. You roll your eyes but can't hide your satisfaction. It's hot, filthy, and your arms feel like they'll fall off. But the dough is ready. You glance at the oven, already warming with coals. Another batch waits. Another day's survival. You roll your shoulders and grab the peel. Let's bake. You shuffle toward the oven, peel in hand, feeling every decade in your bones. The apprentice trails behind you, muttering about the heat like his surprised Egypt is, in fact, hot. You gesture at the flames. This is the heart of it all. He squints. The fire. You roll your eyes. No, genius. The oven. It's cracked mud brick, blackened from years of smoke. You pat it like a pet crocodile. She's temperamental. He looks skeptical. It's an oven. Blasphemy, you whisper, scandalized. Mainstream fact, ancient Egyptian ovens were often dome-shaped, with a side opening to stoke the fire and a top or front hatch for loading loaves. Yours is no different, except for the faint smell of 1,000 burnt offerings. You demonstrate the ancient technique, test the heat with your bare hand near the opening. Your palm tells you it's ready, just shy of scalding. He flinches when you beckon. Your turn. He sticks his hand in gingerly and yelps. You nod. Good. Hot enough. He glares. Very scientific. You grin. He grabs the peel awkwardly. You guide his grip. Balance it. Don't rush. Don't dump them like a sack of onions. He slides the first loaf in. It lands with a satisfying thunk. You clap softly. 1. He rolls his eyes but smiles. Together, you load the rest. Quirky tidbit, some ovens were communal, whole neighborhoods would use a single big one, paying a tiny fee. You tell him about old ladies guarding them like temple priests. He snorts. They'd kick you out. You nod solemnly. Or worse. They'd insult your mother's bread. He fakes a gasp. Barbarians. The heat grows worse. Sweat runs down your spine. You fan yourself with the peel. Now, you say, we wait. Watch the crust. He slumps to the floor. Can't we nap? You swat his head gently. Outside, a donkey brays. Someone drops a pot, cursing. You lean back on your heels, watching the ovens glow. Historians still argue whether temple bakeries fed just priests or entire work crews. You ponder this out loud. Your apprentice just grunts. Long as they pay us. You grunt in agreement. The smell hits you first. Warm. Yeasty. Rich. You close your eyes, savoring it. Better than incense, you murmur. He sniffs, nose twitching. I'm starving. You laugh. Not our bread. This batch is for the gods. He groans theatrically. They don't even have mouths. Blasphemy again, you sing. He flips you off with floury fingers. You waggle your eyebrows. The loaves begin to brown. You both lean forward, synchronized. You spot one cracking wrong. You bark orders. Sprinkle water. Not drown it. Gods don't like soggy bread. He fumbles but manages. You both wipe sweat from your brows, eyeing the crusts. It's a dance you know well. Too long, it burns. Too short, it's raw. You tap the side of the oven, listening for the hollow sound that tells you the bottoms are firm. Get ready, you mutter. He readies the peel like a soldier about to charge. Steady, you say. He breathes deeply. Now. You move as one, sliding the loaves out onto reed mats. Steam curls from them. The scent is glorious. You catch his wide-eyed stare and nod. Respect, you say softly. He exhales shakily. They look edible. High praise. You examine one, thumping the crust gently. Perfect. You resist the urge to devour it on the spot. Now, you say, voice dropping dramatically, the worst part. He raises an eyebrow. Cooling. He slams his forehead onto the table. New. You chuckle. The cat returns, sniffing the loaves, tail flicking. You shoo it gently. You both sit there, exhausted but proud. The fire crackles. Outside, someone calls for a beer delivery. Inside, it's quiet except for the cooling hiss of bread. You glance at your apprentice. He's nodding off. You resist the urge to let him sleep. Hey! He blinks awake. Good work. He stares at you, shocked. You look away. Don't get used to it. He grins. You hide your own smile behind a hand. And you wait together, watching the steam curl like prayers to the gods. You pick up a loaf, still warm, and tap it gently. The crust sings, a soft hollow note that promises good crumb inside. Your apprentice watches you like you just performed a miracle. See that, you say softly. That's your paycheck. He grins, suddenly more alert. So what now? You lean in, voice dropping to a whisper. Now, we prepare for distribution. Mainstream fact, bakers in ancient Egypt often worked closely with merchants and temple officials to ensure bread reached markets and offerings on time. You explain how timing is everything, early deliveries fetch better prices, late ones mean hungry customers and grumbling priests. He frowns. Sounds stressful. You nod. Welcome to history. You gather the cooled loaves onto large palm leaf baskets, careful to stack them so the shapes don't squash. The fish and lotus loaves look almost too pretty to eat. Almost. Your apprentice clumsily carries a basket, wobbling under the weight. You catch his elbow before disaster. Careful, or you'll ruin the batch. He sighs. This is harder than it looks. You smile, remembering your first day. It always is. Quirky tidbit, some bakers delivered bread by donkey carts, while others hand-carried offerings to nearby temples. You share a story about a baker who once lost a whole load to a mischievous ibis, Egypt's version of a feathered bandit. Your apprentice laughs, shaking his head. Birds are the worst. You nod solemnly. Never trust a bird with your bread. Outside, the city hums, vendors shout, children play, and distant bells toll. You load baskets onto a small wooden cart, ready to send your work into the bustling streets. You pause, glancing at your apprentice's tired but determined face. Historians still argue whether temple bakers enjoyed privileges like exemption from certain taxes or if they lived as humble laborers. You muse aloud, watching him consider the idea. Either way, you say, bakers held the city's bread and its secrets. He nods slowly. You both start toward the market, the sun climbing higher and the day growing hotter. You feel the weight of countless loaves, centuries of tradition, and the steady rhythm of daily survival. With every step, you remind yourself, this is more than baking. This is history you can taste. The morning sun beats down as you push the heavy cart through the crowded streets of the city. The smell of fresh bread mingles with the scents of spices, river mud, and the occasional whiff of something far less pleasant. Your apprentice trails behind, sweating and swatting away flies, the basket of loaves wobbling dangerously on the cart. Steady now, you remind him, eyeing the jostling cargo. You navigate past merchants shouting about dates and figs, potters shaping clay, and scribes scribbling away on papyrus. It's a noisy world, but for you, it's just another part of the rhythm. Mainstream fact: bread was a staple of the Egyptian diet, but quality varied. Royal bread was often enriched with honey or spices, while commoners made do with coarser varieties. You describe how your loaves fall somewhere in the middle, humble but satisfying. Your apprentice looks curiously at a vendor selling fragrant oils. Ever think about spicing up our bread? You chuckle. Spices were luxury items. We're lucky if we get salt. He makes a face. Salt? Really? You nod. Salt was like gold for flavor. You stop near the temple gates, where priests and officials wait to inspect the offerings. The air is thick with incense and anticipation. You carefully hand over the baskets, watching as the priests examine the loaves with ritual seriousness. Quirky tidbit: bakers sometimes carved tiny symbols or figures into loaves as offerings to specific gods, a sort of edible prayer. You tell your apprentice about the baker who once shaped a loaf into a tiny baboon to honor Thoth, the god of wisdom. He laughs, imagining the baboon loaf. Hope it tasted as wise as it looked. You smile. Better than most sermons. The priests nod approvingly, accepting the bread and murmuring blessings. Historians still argue whether these ritual breads were actually eaten by the gods or simply stored in tombs as symbolic sustenance. You muse on the mystery, sharing the thought with your apprentice, who shrugs and says, as long as it doesn't go to waste. The morning light softens as you turn away from the temple, the cart lighter and your steps slower. You catch your apprentice glancing back, a faint smile tugging at his lips. Not bad for your first day, you say quietly. He wipes sweat from his brow. Yeah, not bad at all. You both head back toward the bakery, the city bustling around you, ready to face whatever tomorrow brings. Back at the bakery, the afternoon heat hangs heavy like a thick linen curtain. You wipe sweat from your brow and lean against the rough wall, the scent of baked bread still lingering warmly around you. Your apprentice collapses on a low stool, rubbing his sore hands. How do you do this every day? You grin, shaking your head. Practice, and a stubborn refusal to starve. Mainstream fact: in ancient Egypt, bakers often worked long hours, starting before dawn and sometimes continuing well into the night to keep up with demand. You explain how the rhythm of the workday was dictated by the rising and setting sun, with breaks for quick meals and occasional water from the Nile. Your apprentice stretches, eyes drifting toward the small window where the sun casts golden bars across the floor. Ever wonder what it was like before ovens? He asks quietly. You nod, thinking about the smoky hearth fires and sun-dried flatbreads. Those early bakers had it tough, no temperature control, no luxury of coals. You describe how the transition to clay ovens was a game-changer, creating better texture and flavor, a small step toward the bread we know today. Quirky tidbit: some bakers believed that the quality of bread was influenced by the moon's phases, baking during certain nights to harness divine favor. You share this with your apprentice, who raises an eyebrow. superstitious, or smart marketing, he jokes. You laugh. Maybe a bit of both. The cat weaves between your legs, purring softly. You bend to scratch behind its ears, feeling the quiet companionship amid the day's toil. Historians still debate whether bakers were regarded simply as laborious or held a unique social status due to their vital role. You muse aloud, wondering if the pride you feel in your craft was shared across centuries. Your apprentice nods thoughtfully, then grins. I think I'm starting to get it. This baking thing, it's not just food. Exactly, you say softly. It's life. Culture. Survival. Outside, the call to prayer echoes faintly across the city. You glance at the sinking sun, feeling the steady pulse of another day's end. The bakery quiets, shadows stretching long across the floor. You and your apprentice share a tired smile, ready to rest before the cycle begins again. As the sun dips lower, the bakery fills with the golden haze of evening. You gather your tools, wooden paddles, baskets, and scraps of cloth, tidying the workspace with practiced ease. Your apprentice watches you, a newfound respect in his eyes. You make it look easy, he admits. You shake your head. Decades of bad habits. Mostly. Mainstream fact. Bakers often maintained their tools carefully, knowing that a well-seasoned peel or a soft cloth could make or break the day's work. You describe how flour dust settled like soft snow over everything, settling into the cracks of tools and walls alike. You run a cloth over the peel surface, noting the worn spots where the wood has been smoothed by years of use. Each mark tells a story, you say. Your apprentice nods, tracing a finger over a groove. Like a map of bread. You chuckle. Quirky tidbit, some bakers decorated their peels with simple carvings or symbols, believing these brought good fortune to the loaves and kept away kitchen spirits. You tell the story of a baker who etched a tiny scarab beetle on his paddle, Egypt's ancient symbol of renewal. He laughs softly. I'll have to get one for my own peel. The shadows lengthen as the day fades, and the soft murmur of the Nile drifts through the open window. You lean against the wall, breathing in the mingled scents of earth, flour, and fading fire. Historians still debate whether bakers sang songs or chanted during work to pass time or invoke blessings. You hum a quiet tune from memory, watching your apprentice smile faintly. Outside, the city settles into evening rhythm, distant voices, the clatter of closing stalls, and the faint rustle of palm leaves. You glance at your apprentice, feeling the bond forged through shared sweat and flour. Tomorrow, we start early again, you say softly. He nods, already tired but eager. You both stand, ready to leave the bakery to rest until dawn's first light. The cat curls into a warm ball on the floor, purring its final lullaby. You flick off the oil lamp, plunging the room into gentle darkness. Outside, the stars begin to twinkle, ancient witnesses to centuries of bread-making. You breathe deeply, feeling the calm after a day's hard work, and whisper, "Good night." You wake early, before the sun peaks over the horizon, the cool air still holding the night's calm. The bakery feels quiet, almost sacred in this half-light. Your apprentice stirs beside you, yawning but ready. Mainstream fact, the early morning was prime baking time in ancient Egypt, before the heat became oppressive, and while the city still slept. You describe the soft rustle of preparing dough and the gentle crackling of firewood as the day begins anew. You knead the dough with slow, steady hands, feeling the grains slip through your fingers like soft sand. Your apprentice watches, fascinated. You make it look like a dance. You smile. It's a rhythm, really. The dough tells you when it's ready. Quirky tidbit, some bakers believed that talking gently to the dough helped it rise better, whispering blessings or even silly stories to coax the yeast awake. You share a whispered tale of a baker who told his loaves bedtime stories every night. He laughs quietly. Maybe I should try that. The air is crisp and filled with the scent of fresh flour and the promise of new bread. Historians still debate whether bakeries employed dedicated dough whisperers or if this was simply charming folklore. You muse aloud, knowing that every tradition starts somewhere. You pull the dough into loaves, shaping each with care, and the apprentice mimics you, a bit clumsily but with growing confidence. Outside, the first birds sing. The city begins to stir. You feel the steady pulse of history beneath your hands, as familiar and comforting as the dawn itself. The fire in the oven crackles warmly as you slide the dough inside, the radiant heat promising transformation. The smell of baking bread begins to weave through the air, a comforting scent that softens the edges of the waking city. Your apprentice leans close to the oven's mouth, mesmerized by the glowing embers and the gentle orange light. You can almost see the bread growing, he whispers. You nod, feeling the same quiet awe. Mainstream fact: ancient Egyptian bakers used dome-shaped clay ovens called rataban, which trapped heat efficiently to bake bread evenly. You explain how controlling the temperature required patience and experience, as there were no thermometers, just intuition and practice. You carefully manage the firewood, adding small pieces to maintain a steady warmth without overwhelming the dough. Your apprentice asks about the different types of bread you bake, and you describe how some loaves were coarse and dark, others light and sweetened with dates or honey, each suited to different meals or social classes. Quirky tidbit: some bakers believed that baking bread under specific star alignments improved the flavor, a celestial seasoning of sorts. You joke about how that might make you an ancient astrologer as well as a baker. He laughs. So we're baking by the stars now? You grin. Why not? Historians still debate whether these star-related baking traditions were widespread or just local superstitions. You muse on how people everywhere have always found ways to make daily work feel magical. The bread inside the oven begins to rise, its crust starting to brown. You and your apprentice sit quietly nearby, soaking in the warm glow and soft crackle of the fire. Outside, the city hums softly with life waking up around you. The comforting scent of fresh bread fills the room and your heart. You carefully pull the loaves from the oven, their golden crusts crackling softly as they cool in the gentle morning light. The scent fills the bakery, a promise of nourishment and quiet satisfaction. Your apprentice claps his hands, eyes shining with accomplishment. They look perfect. You smile, feeling the familiar warmth of pride mixed with exhaustion. Mainstream fact: bakers often tested bread quality by tapping the crust and listening for a hollow sound, indicating a well-baked interior. You demonstrate the tap, explaining how the sound guided generations of bakers. Your apprentice tries it, grinning when the loaf responds with the expected hollow note. Not bad for a novice, you tease. Quirky tidbit: some ancient bakers used small stones or seeds to create interesting patterns or shapes on their bread, both for aesthetics and to identify different recipes. You tell the story of a baker who embedded tiny dates into a loaf as a sweet surprise. He laughs. A secret treat inside bread, nice. You nod. Keeps things interesting. Historians still debate whether such decorative breads were everyday treats or reserved for special occasions. You muse about how even simple food can carry stories and traditions. The market outside begins to stir as vendors set up their stalls, eager to sell their goods. You load the freshly baked bread onto baskets, ready to deliver warmth and comfort to hungry customers. Your apprentice helps, the bond between you deepening with shared effort and quiet triumph. The day continues, marked by the steady rhythm of baking, sharing, and sustaining life. The midday sun now hangs high and heavy, casting a warm glow that seeps through the bakery's small window. You take a moment to rest your hands, their skin toughened and dusted with flour. Your apprentice fans himself, exhaustion clear but determination shining in his eyes. Mainstream fact: bread sellers often had to balance quality with speed to meet the city's insatiable demand. You talk about how bakers managed to keep loaves fresh during the hottest parts of the day, sometimes storing them in cool, shaded baskets or wrapping them in cloth. You recount the careful timing needed to have fresh bread ready for midday markets, a delicate dance of patience and urgency. Quirky tidbit: some bakers believed that humming softly while working helped maintain a steady pace and calmed the rising heat, a secret baking chant passed down through generations. You share a soft hum, inviting your apprentice to join. He smiles shyly, trying the tune, the simple melody easing the day's tension. Historians still argue whether these humming traditions were practical work rhythms or spiritual rituals, but either way, they added rhythm to the toil. Outside, vendors call out, children laugh, and the city's pulse beats steady and warm. You glance at your apprentice, seeing the transformation from novice to confident baker in his posture and hands. Ready for the next batch, you ask softly. He nods, wiping sweat from his brow but already reaching for the mixing bowl. The afternoon stretches ahead, filled with flour-dusted hands and the timeless smell of baking bread. As afternoon light softens, you begin preparing the next batch of dough. The rhythmic folding and kneading becomes a soothing ritual, your fingers coaxing life into the sticky mixture. Your apprentice watches closely, absorbing every movement and gesture. Mainstream fact: Egyptian bakers often used a sourdough starter, a bitter fermented dough kept alive and passed down daily, to leaven bread. You describe the delicate balance of nurturing this living culture, ensuring the bread would rise just right. You show your apprentice how to feed the starter, adding flour and water carefully, watching it bubble with promise. Quirky tidbit: some bakers believed that the starter carried the spirit of the bakery, and stories were told of starters surviving through generations, almost like ancient pets. You joke about naming your starter one day. He laughs. Like a bread dog. Exactly. Historians still debate whether these stories of starter spirits were literal beliefs or clever marketing to keep bakers loyal to their dough. You muse on how every kitchen has its own little myths. The afternoon air grows warmer, but the steady pace of work offers a comforting distraction. You and your apprentice exchange quiet smiles, the shared routine folding you closer together. Outside, the sounds of the city soften into a gentle buzz, as if settling into the afternoon lull. The scent of fresh dough and dusted flour hangs thick around you, a timeless aroma that connects past and present. The light shifts toward evening as you slide the last loaves into the oven, the warmth spreading through the bakery like a soft blanket. Your apprentice sighs, exhaustion softened by satisfaction. You wipe your hands on your apron, the familiar scents and sounds wrapping around you like an old friend. Mainstream fact: in ancient Egypt, bakers often doubled as brewers, using leftover grains to create beer, another staple of daily life. You share how the recycling of ingredients reflected practical ingenuity and community sharing. Your apprentice raises an eyebrow. So, bread and beer go hand in hand. Like old friends at a festival, you reply with a grin. Quirky tidbit: some ancient brewers believed the beer's flavor improved if the brewing room was blessed by the family's cats, thought to chase away evil spirits. You chuckle as you recall the bakery's own furry overseer. Historians still debate whether these cat blessings were widespread rituals or charming local customs. You muse that a happy cat certainly wouldn't hurt the flavor. The bakery quiets as loaves bake, the soft crackling of firewood the only sound. Outside, the last light fades, stars beginning to peek through the darkening sky. You and your apprentice sit near the oven, sharing stories and laughter, the day's work folding gently into night. The promise of tomorrow lingers in the warm air, as steady as the river's flow. The bakery rests in the quiet hum of night, but your thoughts drift to tomorrow's work, dough, ovens, and the comforting rhythm of the routine. Your apprentice stretches, eyes heavy but eager to learn more. Mainstream fact: ancient Egyptian bakers often lived near their workplaces, blending home and labor into one seamless life. You describe how the bakery could feel like a second home, with the constant scent of bread and the warmth of the ovens a daily companion. You share how families sometimes work together, the baking knowledge passed from parent to child like a cherished heirloom. Quirky tidbit: some bakers kept small charms or amulets in the bakery, tiny statues of gods like Biz, protector of households and childbirth, hoping to bring good fortune to their bread and family alike. You describe these little talismans tucked away near the hearth. He smiles, imagining the ancient charm quietly watching over the loaves. Historians still argue whether such amulets were common in bakeries or mostly personal items. You muse that belief, like bread, rises best when nurtured carefully. Outside, the night deepens, wrapped in a cool silence broken only by distant calls from the city. You both settle down, ready to rest before dawn's first light. The bakery holds its breath, waiting patiently for the next day's story to begin. The first whispers of dawn stretch softly across the horizon, the sky a gentle blend of rose and lavender. You rise quietly, the bakery still wrapped in the cool hush of early morning. Your apprentice stirs beside you, the day's work waiting patiently to begin anew. Mainstream fact: baking in ancient Egypt was a daily ritual deeply tied to the cycles of the sun and Nile, shaping lives through steady, nurturing routines. You reflect on how these rhythms linked the bakers not just to their craft but to the flow of life itself. You feel the worn stone beneath your feet, the lingering warmth of countless loaves still faint in the air. Quirky tidbit: some ancient bakers believed that dreaming of fresh bread was a good omen, promising prosperity and health, a superstition that made sleep all the more comforting. You smile, thinking of how such small hopes can sweeten even the darkest night. Historians still debate whether such beliefs were widespread or whispered among small communities, but the magic of hope remains universal. The city awakens softly beyond the bakery's walls, birds singing as the Nile glistens in the morning light. You and your apprentice prepare for another day, the endless story of bread and life continuing without pause. Now, as the day begins, you feel the gentle pull of rest settling in, time to let the senses drift and soften. You breathe deeply, the warm scent of bread fading into a quiet, comforting memory. The bakery stands ready, a timeless cradle for tomorrow's work. The day's journey done, let your mind slow, your breath even, and your thoughts settle like flour gently falling onto still dough. Imagine the warm oven's glow fading softly into darkness, the soft crackle of firewood growing quiet as stars twinkle overhead. Feel the gentle comfort of steady rhythms, the ancient flow of hands working, shaping, nurturing. Rest now in the calm embrace of history's soft hum, safe and soothed by the simple story of bread. May your dreams rise light and steady, like the perfect loaf, warm, nourishing, and full of quiet promise.